It's one of the most closely watched primaries in the nation. 6 candidates seeking the Republican spot on the ballot to challenge Democratic Congressman Glenn Nye in the 2nd District this November. Tonight, our panel of political experts examines why this race is so important. This is What Matters. Good evening, I'm Kathy Lewis. It's been a while since we saw 6 candidates vying for a primary nod, but that's the case in the 2nd District and indeed across the country. The 2nd includes on the Eastern Shore all of Accomack and Northampton counties, as well as the city of Virginia Beach and parts of the cities of Norfolk and Hampton. And here is the lineup for the June 8th primary. Ben Loyola is the owner of an engineering firm. Ed Malbach is a defense contractor. Brigadier General Burt Mizuzawa is a government and corporate consultant. Scott Ridgell is the owner of Freedom Automotive. Jessica Sandlin is a former teacher and mother of 5. And Scott Taylor is a real estate broker and a security consultant. The winner of the June 8th primary, one of those 6, will then move on to challenge incumbent Democratic Congressman Glenn Nye. Joining us to talk about why the 2nd is in the national spotlight, retired 2nd District Congressman Dr. William Whitehurst, who held that post for many, many years. Dr. Charles Dunn is with us today as well. He's the Dean of the Robertson School of Government at Regent University. And Karen Hurd is the co-founder of the Hampton Roads Tea Party. Thanks to all of you for being with us tonight. I appreciate it. Boy, what a fascinating race this has been. The field was huge, and now it's a little bit smaller, Dr. Dunn, but I don't think anybody really expected there would still be 6 in it at this point. Well,
this demonstrates what's happening nationally. The American public is quite unsettled. We see this in poll numbers regarding Barack Obama, regarding the direction of the country. So many polls show the discontent among the American people, and the American people exercising the right of democracy are getting out and trying to do something about it. This is inspiring a lot of candidacies, inspiring a lot of groups to get involved, including the Tea Party. So we have the good fortune here of having one of these districts with a lot of people involved. It's a great opportunity, a laboratory of democracy, to see these candidates face off.
And Dr. Whitehurst, you represented the 2nd for many years. What are your thoughts about watching this field of candidates vie for your old job?
I think really what it is a lot of sentiment against the people who are in office, a disappointment with Washington. I don't want to be specific about Congressman Nye. What I'm saying is there's just an
Washington in general,
anti-incumbency feeling that the train's off the rails. People are deeply concerned and should be about the enormous debt we're building up in this country and other aspects as well. And sometimes just luck of the draw. Things just happen, and if you're an incumbent, you catch it. As Harry Truman said, the buck lands on your desk. And you may have nothing to do with the circumstances, but you're just caught up in it. And anybody that's an incumbent these days is obviously feeling the pressure.
Yeah, no kidding. It's such an interesting and diverse field of candidates in terms of experience and life experience and all of the rest of it. Karen Hurd, nice to have you with us tonight. The Tea Party certainly, by all accounts, is playing a significant role in this race.
Right.
And has across the country.
When we say the Tea Party, there's both the Tea Party movement and then actual Tea Parties. What was so interesting as we started getting involved in the elections, originally we were going to just be observers. And part of that was we weren't sure how much free speech we had as a 501c4. And with the Citizens United versus the FEC, which Elena Kagan, ironically, was the attorney arguing for the government, she lost, and free speech was restored to organizations like ours, which then allowed us to participate much more actively than just do a voter guide and be some kind of neutral observer.
So you all chose to endorse a candidate in this race?
We did. We were starting to, in the beginning, everybody sounds the same. In the beginning, everybody's for the Constitution, everybody's for this, everybody's against Washington. And but you think, well, there's got to be some differences here. They can't be all the same shade of whatever. And as we started digging a little bit, and as we started observing the candidates at different forums, we had an April Fool's forum, we started looking at, or I did in particular, I'm watching their character, I'm watching how they interact, I'm watching how are they handling disappointments, how are they handling it when somebody doesn't speak well of them, and I was actually looking for character, I was looking for indicators of how they might be under pressure, because I believe that whoever we send in nationally in 2010. It's going to be a real battle between two clashing worldviews, between a worldview that says government that should do more and a worldview that says, no, founders had it they were spot on and the government should do less and individuals should do more. And we, as we realized that we really could take a more active role, our members started saying, would you guys do something? Because they knew we had much more access. They knew we had been at more of these debates. We had candidates
so they were
calling
really
us all the time.
asking you for
not that they couldn't decide,
direction.
but they realized that we had a little bit more exposure, a little bit more information than either they had chosen to access.
So how did you settle on the candidate that you chose?
A couple of things. One of the things we considered was who was the closest to, we felt, constitutional thinking.
Okay.
Everybody espouses the Constitution, but what does that really mean? How do you use the Constitution, the enumerated powers, for example, of the federal government when you're approaching problems within the culture, within government, and big issues? And we were also looking for who had the best breadth of experience, not only government experience, obviously military experience is very important in this area, given that 30% of our economy is military.
And so you chose Ben Loyola.
We chose Ben Loyola.
Which is interesting because and I think Dr. Dunn and Dr. Whitehurst, you've both referred to him as sort of the establishment candidate, is Scott Ridgel, the one who has been endorsed by the governor. So this sets up a very interesting dynamic in the second.
Yes, because you have the establishment candidate, Scott Ridgel, versus the field. And in a multi-candidate primary like this, that person, namely Ridgel, has a distinct advantage. He has the money. He has people like Governor McDonald, who is so highly esteemed, behind him. So against the field, likelihood is he's going to win. Now, we've had 2 or 3 of the other candidates run pretty good races, but they haven't had much traction. Now, this endorsement by the Tea Party of Loyola will help him a little bit. But we should expect in a race like this that someone like Ridgel would receive 40 to 50% of the vote. If he doesn't, then he could be in trouble come November.
And that's an interesting point, because one of the things that you read when you read the folks who care passionately about the Republican race in the second, I saw several entries from people who said, great that there are 6 people running, but not so great that there are 6 people running. Dr. Whitehurst, the idea that if 2 or 3 of them could have gotten in a room, had a cup of coffee together and said, we're going to split this vote. Why not us all get behind one guy or one gal? Is there some wisdom to that argument?
Yes, there is considerable. Let me give my own example. When I ran in 1968, there was no problem with my nomination. I hadn't been a Republican elected since 1930. But the Democrats had 2 candidates in their primary. One was Bingo Stout, who was more liberal, and the other was Jack Rixey, who was more conservative. He was regarded as a bird Democrat. And we were pulling, stayed out of the race, out of the primary, but pulling for Stout to win, because there would be a philosophical difference between his position and mine. So we were pulling, and Stout won the primary. So you had this. And what happened was, many of the conservative Democrats were so angry at losing the primary, they voted for Bill Whitehurst in the general election. I had a number of them come over and said, okay, I'm going to support you. Some did it quietly, didn't want to be identified. But there were a number also just came out directly and said, we're not going to vote for Stamp, we're going to vote for Whitehurst. I got 54% of the vote, and I went to Washington. So it does happen. And the curious thing will be what the Tea Party people do if their man doesn't get in it. And will they take a walk on election day? Or are they going to rally and say, well, better this man than the fellow is incumbent?
Well, what's the answer? Well,
we're going to cross that bridge if we come to it on June 9th. I think part of the issue is there's such a distrust and such a, I'm going to say, disgust with establishment politics, I think, on both sides of the aisle, the idea that it's about maintaining a power base and not a principle, that it's about a party line vote, not a principled vote on what's right for America, what's right for your district in the case of the House of Representatives. So what we discovered was that the anti-Ridgel vote was much stronger than we thought. Really across the field, as you've said. And so the other thing we noticed is what makes we feel Ridgel a weak candidate is the Democrats started savaging him back in early, mid to late April. They'd love for him to win because he'll be easier to defeat with Glenn Nye, who, although his votes were at the last minute, he can say, I voted against the health control bill, I voted against.
But what I don't hear you saying is, if whoever the Republican candidate is, by golly, we're going to line up and we're going to be supportive. It doesn't sound like you're saying that.
We're not saying that yet.
Okay.
We're not saying that yet.
Tradition. That if you participate in a party, in a primary, you lose, then you go with the winner. That's the historic tradition.
We didn't mean what we said yesterday. He's a great guy.
That's right. And we have the history from the founding with the Federalists and Anti-Federalists of two major parties. It's always been that way. We've had third parties and third-party movements come and go, whether it's Ross Perot in '92 or Strom Thurmond in '48 or George Wallace in '68, and you go back to prior to the Civil War, barn burners, local focus, anti-Masonic party, all those, they come and go. They have one day in the sun, and that's it. The two parties absorb these movements. The Tea Party will be absorbed. It has a day in the sun to do whatever it's going to do. It's this year. They might extend over to 2012, but they lack leadership. And
are you talking about national leadership? The fact that there's difficult to say,
right.
That's our guy or that's our gal?
We like it that way, actually. We like it that way. It's a lot harder to knock someone down when you don't have a titular head.
Yeah, but if you don't have a leader to speak for you, it makes it very difficult to get your message out there. So the Tea Party has a great opportunity to influence with ideas and decisions about candidates as they're trying to do in this district. But I think we have to put this in a larger context. Namely, 72% of the American people do not like the Congress right now. President Obama's job approval ratings have fallen into the mid-40s. Well, what do we know about that statistic? Whenever a president, first midterm, has a job approval rating under 50%, his party will lose on the average of about 35 seats in the U.S. House. The range has been historically between 17 and 54. So you put all these numbers together, this does not bode well for Glenn Nye, who has actually done a good job of positioning himself in this district. I would have to commend him.
He's got a tough job. I think as a Democrat in that district, he's gotten dinged on from the Democrats for not voting the way they had hoped he might vote on health care. He's gotten dinged on from the other side. I mean,
which demonstrates he's probably done a pretty good job.
And he's now marketing himself, and interestingly enough, he's marketing himself as an independent voice. He's trying to, because you can write coattails in and you can write coattails out. And so he is marketing himself not really as a Democrat, because the very liberal Democrats can't stand him, and we're not all that trusting of him because he's a part of the Pelosi line. And we really believe that if Pelosi had needed his vote on health control or cap and tax, she would have gotten it.
You know, the other interesting thing, it seems to me, about these primaries, a couple of things. One is that, as I understand it, anybody can vote in them. Anybody in the district.
In Virginia, anybody can vote. You don't have to be registered.
You don't have to be a registered Republican. You can, if you're a Democrat, you can go out and vote. You're an independent, you can go out and vote.
And if you're Glenn Nye and you're the Democrats, you want to have your people go out and vote for the weakest candidate in the Republican field, whoever that person is.
And that's the crossover voting, and that gets advised, and they've been advising them both for Ridgel and for Mrs. Awa.
So speaking of Mrs. Awa, there has been this very interesting argument about his residency status. He started a company in Hampton in March of '09, and some are suggesting that he's had a long history in McLean, and that he's sort of really more a Northern Virginian, Dr. Whitehurst. But I didn't realize that too, as a technical matter, doesn't really matter.
Bobby Kennedy was elected a senator from New York. Where did he come from?
Fair enough. Yeah.
Okay, so
you don't have to live in the district.
Well, technically, no, you do not. So
that was fascinating.
Member of the House of Representatives, you are not obligated to live in the district. Politically, however, I think it's suicide if you don't live in the district.
And we should note again, he claims Hampton as his home base, has a business there.
He grew up here. He grew up here, and that's his argument. We grew up here. But when we were vetting our candidates, I will tell you, it was very difficult to reach his office.
Well, I want to just talk about this issue of residency, because it is a curious thing that in the House of Representatives, you don't necessarily have to live in the district.
You don't necessarily have to live in the district, but I can't think of anybody who when I was in the House, who did not live in the district. I remember a colleague of mine, Bill Dickinson, Republican from Alabama, and his opponent really did not have a house in the district. He was living in Washington, and Bill just crucified him. He called him a suitcase congressman, and this thing stuck. And so you better have a residence there and live there and have a lot of visibility, so people know you're one of them.
So I think it's important, if I may, just real quickly, especially in this race, because one of the key issues is a sense of lack of representation, a sense of D.C. being disconnected and cut off. So symbolically, not having your primary residence here, but your family installed and having been living primarily out of Northern Virginia, I think this is the wrong time of in history to do that.
And that being said, he is also being very well regarded without respect to the residency issue, in terms of some of his very fine education, fine background, military accomplishments. So as you look at these 6 candidates, who do you see sort of emerging out of this pack? Accepting that Ridgel may be the front runner at the moment, it seems to me there are some others in this pack that we will start to hear from.
Well, Loyola right now, because he did get the Tea Party endorsement, that should give him some movement at the street level, phone calls, getting the handbills out. Mrs. Zawa also, the best piece of literature that's been put out, his campaign put it out. It arrived in the mails yesterday.
And Jessica Sandlin, another very interesting candidate, a mom.
She's articulate. She stakes out positions that a person looking at her objective say, why are you a Republican?
I thought that as well. When I read some of her things, I thought, all righty.
No, but she, again, she's running the only female in this race, so she may get a lot of female votes.
But she has a lot of candor about her. You know, she just sort of, when you talk to her, she sort of says what she thinks.
Yes, and people are looking for candor because there's so much distrust in America today.
And of course we have Scott Taylor.
And Scott Taylor has run a reasonably good campaign, but he hasn't gained much traction. He's articulate. He takes pretty good positions on the issues for a Republican. So I think what we see here is a field of people who have a lot of potential, but it is unrealized potential, and they're not likely to realize it this year.
Malbec also in the campaign has been an interesting figure in this race as well.
His first commercial has come out. Very well done commercial.
So do you have the sense then, Dr. Whitehurst, I mean, it's kind of interesting that with a couple of exceptions, most of these folks are first-time candidates for office. It seems like that's a gutsy thing to do for run for Congress, your first turn at bat. But it looks like we're going to get some people out of this that may have gotten the public service bug.
I have no question about it. I saw people bitten with it. I also saw colleagues of mine bitten by a higher bug. They were told to run for president or governor. Lyndon Halton came to me in his 3rd year and asked me to want to succeed him to be governor of Virginia. It's very flattering when the governor of Virginia comes to see you in your apartment and tells you he wants you to succeed him. And I declined, and he got upset with me. And he said, why don't you want to do it? I said, Linwood, I don't have an agenda for the state. And I think if you're running for president or governor, you should have an agenda. And I said, I could care less what happens in Lee County. It's west of Detroit, Michigan. I said, but I think I can hold the congressional seat. I think most of the people who are in this are very serious about it. They want to make a statement, and they would like to have the nomination. But I think they have very strong views with respect to what's happening in the nation and how it ought to be changed. And I would never doubt that. But there are going to be some disappointments when after the primary is over.
We've got about a minute and a half left. I'm going to leave you out of this question because you've endorsed a candidate. I'm going to ask my strategists here this question. If you were advising Glenn Nye, okay, put that hat on for a minute. If you're advising Glenn Nye, what do you tell him to do on the other end of this primary?
Keep doing what you've been doing. Hope for the best among the candidates, that you'll get a weaker candidate, but stake out yourself as a centrist. And that's where Ridgel will be the strongest candidate. Most Americans are in the center of a bell curve. They're not far right and they're not far left. Ronald Reagan understood that. He governed center right. Bill Clinton understood that. He governed center left. Nye's positioned himself well there. Ridgel understands that. And therefore, a head-to-head Ridgel versus Nye could be a very good race.
Let me go to the bottom line. I actually talked to him and several of the candidates who called me. I'm not endorsing anybody. First of all, I don't do it. Second, I'm doing the 2nd District. I said, you go to the precincts that Thelma carried.
Thelma Drake, the former 2nd District Congresswoman.
Who ran against Nye. And you go to those precincts and you get her supporters and you squeeze it like a lemon. That's how you win. It's a numbers game. You can have all the endorsements in the world. They're just names on the ad. I said, you've got to go right down to the basic level where it gets done. Those are the votes, those are the people. You go, and I told the others the same thing who came to see me. I'm not advising anybody for any reason. If you come and ask me, that's how I won. I went to my strength, and by going to my strength, I got elected, and I was up there 9 times.
And I will tell you that is some good advice, any way you slice it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. We really appreciate it. It's been a terrific conversation. Before we leave you tonight, there is something marvelous and new at the Chrysler Museum that has nothing to do with politics. It's the Johannes Vermeer's Young Woman Seated at a Virginal. It's the 300-plus-year-old painting that's on display all summer at the museum. But how did it end up there? Well, the Chrysler's executive director, Bill Hennessy, has the story behind this work from the famed Dutch painter.
I think there are few artists in history whose name has the magic of Johannes Vermeer. Vermeer's a wonderfully mysterious guy. Not only did he paint very slowly and very carefully so that there aren't many works by him, but the results were simply magical. I mean, no one could capture sort of soft, silvery light the way he could. Don't know, however, whether this was a commission, a portrait, so it's a specific person, or whether this might just have been a model that Vermeer said, sit down, put your hands on the keyboard, let me paint not so much you as an individual person, but the quality of the light flowing over you and the color of your outfit. The instrument she's playing is called a virginals. It was a kind of primitive version of a portable harpsichord where the strings are plucked. It makes a very soft, almost lute-like sound. And she's set it up in her room. Clearly a window off on the left-hand side of the picture through which this soft Dutch light is coming in and kind of flowing over her. Illuminates her face, it picks up a little crick on her elbow where she's reaching out to touch the keyboard. And then just so it's not all soft grays and blues and yellows, he gives her these great little barrettes in her hair that are a great red accent. It's a kind of symphony of color. You know, we're very lucky here at the Chrysler to have a group of trustees that are miraculously well connected in the art world. And one of our trustees, Linda Kaufman, who is herself a distinguished collector, not just of the American furniture you see in this room, but of Dutch paintings, put us in touch with a private collector in New York who has very graciously shared half a dozen of his very best pictures with us for the summer. They're all painters from the so-called Dutch Golden Age, this amazing moment in the middle of the 17th century when Holland was just about the most prosperous country in the world, great appetite for great art, and miraculously, a great group of painters emerged to fill that need. People like Rembrandt and Frans Hals, Gabriel Metsu, Peter de Hoek, and in our case here, most notably, Johannes Vermeer. Only through scientific testing and some good historical research have people been able to piece together the history of the picture. And what they've discovered is that the canvas this picture is painted on is almost certainly cut from the same bolt of cloth that was used for a painting called The Lace Maker that's in the Louvre in Paris. And no one could create this atmosphere of peace. No one could orchestrate his colors, his blues and his yellows and his grays to work together with such wonderful harmony. It's looking at one of his pictures is like listening to music.
Marvelous piece of work. Vermeer's Young Woman Seated at a Virginal is featured in the Dutch Golden Age Painters, and that will be on display through August 22nd at the Chrysler Museum of Art in Norfolk, where admission is free most of the week, which is a beautiful thing. And that is a terrific, wonderful gift to the community that the Chrysler has undertaken. And it's on through August 22nd. You know it's going to be hot this summer. So if nothing else, go in there and enjoy some art in the cool weather. That would be a good thing to do, too. Lots of ways you can be in touch with us here at What Matters. On our website, it's whatmatters.tv, and that's where you can watch this program again or any of our other past ones and send us an email. Join us on Facebook, sign up for our weekly newsletter, and find out what we're working on in the weeks ahead. What we do is we let you know as soon as we know. For more local talk, I hope you'll also join us on the radio dial for Hearsay on 89.5. WHRV. Listen in live every weekday at noon, and we will take your calls as well. Thanks again for watching. I'm Kathy Lewis. We'll see you next time for another look at What Matters.